call me Mystic Mac because I predict these things.
Islam Makhachev takes on Jack Della Maddalena this Saturday in the main event of UFC 322 at Madison Square Garden. This is for the welterweight title. Islam Makhachev vacated the 155-pound belt and is now moving up to take on Jack Della Maddalena, try to be a two-weight class champion. This is Jack Della Maddalena's first title defense since taking it away from Belal Muhammad. So I'm not convinced by Islam Makhachev in this matchup. I feel like he's a little overhyped heading into this one. I think that his record is, although impressive, 27-1, I just think it's a little suspect. I think there's a lot of caveats, a lot of asterisks on his record. I'm going to run through that real quick. You know, he comes into the UFC on an absolute streak, wins over some decent guys. Arman Sarukian went to a decision with him, gets a win over Davi Hamos, a good grappler. But, Drew Dober gets the finish in the third round. Drew Dober's he hasn't really been the most elite guy in the world. Thiago Moises went to the fourth round with him in a pretty competitive fight. And Thiago Moises, in hindsight, not the greatest guy. Dan Hooker, King Green, Bobby Green gets the finishes over those guys, both those fights on short notice. Those guys, short notice replacements taking him on. Gets a win over Oliveira, which is good. Charles Oliveira, one of the GOATs, elite, but he can be finished. We've seen that in the past. We've seen that recently. Gets a win over Volkanovski, 5'6", Volkanovski, moving up from featherweight to challenge for the belt. Razor close decision. I think that you can make an argument for that fight either way. Definitely wasn't a unanimous decision in my opinion. I feel like that should have been more like a split decision. And then gets the finish over him. Again, 145-pounder Volkanovski taking the fight on short notice. It's becoming a pattern here on his record. Then he beats Dustin Poirier in a pretty competitive fight. Dustin Poirier had success on the feet, was having a lot of success defending the takedowns. He's going to be much smaller than JDM in this matchup. And then again, Renato Moicano, short notice replacement, gets the finish in round one. So I just kind of question his record. I question, the caliber of opponent, the circumstances of those matchups. He doesn't fight them most often. He's fought 5 times, I think, in like the last 3 years. I feel like the fights have to be pretty advantageous for Islam Makhachev to be taking these matchups on short notice. Type of guy who wants the fight to be on his accord, on his terms, full camps types of things. So he's never going to step up and save a card the way that Alex Pereira does. But now he moves up in weight, take on one of the most skilled guys at welterweight in Jack Della Maddalena, who will have a full camp heading into this one. He just spent a camp to go 5 rounds against a really good grappler and fighter in Belal Muhammad and got the win in that fight. He's arguably got the best boxing in the division. Going to be the biggest guy that Islam's ever faced. Islam on a 10-month hiatus in a weight class he's never been in. Jack Della Maddalena, he's had some close fights in the past, but the dude's just a winner. He's going to be the naturally bigger guy, the natural welterweight, going to be younger, 5 years younger, and we just don't know how Islam's going to look, moving up to welterweight. So Islam's 34 years old, still in his prime technically, but getting up there in age. JDM 29 years old, barely into his prime. Has tons of room to expand and improve, and we saw his improved takedown defense in his last fight. And we just don't know how Makhachev's going to look moving up, carrying the additional weight. Will he look better now, not having to cut the 22 pounds I think that he's having to cut, having to kill himself during camp, having to focus more on the weight cut than the skill development and the game plan? He said he was like 60-70% after his lightweight cuts. So will he be better not having to worry about that weight cut the entire fight camp, not being drained day of the fight? Or will his size advantage be kind of nullified by the size of JDM? I think we have to admit that Islam was kind of a weight bully at 155 pounds. It served his grappling style very well. And I'm just not sure, and I'm not really convinced that his skill level or that his skills are going to translate up a weight class as well as we think. JDM's going to be the naturally bigger guy. He's going to have a 2.5-inch reach advantage. We've seen how Islam, how he's kind of drawn out and dying to get to 155 pounds. Looks like kind of a corpse on the scales. But we've also seen that's how JDM is, right at 170 pounds. So it's going to be kind of relative. They're both pretty big for the weight class, and I imagine JDM still would be, a good 10-15 pounds bigger than Islam, regardless of Islam moving up in weight. I like JDM's improving takedown defense, his scrambling ability. He was taken down at times in his career, but he does a good job of not settling, able to scramble, pop back up. He did that twice in round 1 versus Burns, who's a very high-level grappler. He was taken down, gave up his back round 2, but was able to stay safe. And round 3, Burns had him down along the cage. He was able to stay safe, pop back up, and get the finish against an elite grappler. So he has great scrambles, really good rolls to get out, a really nice switch that he'll even fake to set up a different escape, and just refuses to settle and be held down on the ground. He started to defend the Basil Hafez takedowns as the fight went on, and he is working with Craig Jones. I think that's big. I think Craig Jones is going to be a huge part of his game. He's a jiu-jitsu black belt as well, so I was concerned in his last fight just because he does make kind of low IQ moves at times. At times, he'll pull the ghillie instead of, digging underhooks or fighting more to defend the takedowns, or, he'll go for a Darce to give up position. He was putting himself on bottom against Basil Hafez when he didn't have to. He'd sprawl out, defend the takedown, but then look for a Darce and spend the rest of the round on bottom. He went to the ground with Hafez, tried to take his back in that fight in a round where he was just beating him up on the feet. So I worry about those low IQ moves in that last fight against Bilal Muhammad, but he did really well in that fight. I feel like his grappling has come a long way, but I feel like Bilal wasn't really grappling the way that I thought he would in that fight. I thought he'd have a little bit more success getting JDM along the cage, and I'm curious how that fight would play out if Bilal came out just firing takedowns immediately the same way they did to Leon Edwards. How would JDM, how would his takedown defense lasted as the fight progressed? But Bilal was able to get him to the fence. He did get JDM down and kind of settle on top of him, but JDM did a good job of getting back up and still be able to kind of tag him and open up with tons of volume in round 5 after a very grueling fight. I think JDM, he'll be able to strike and grapple for 5 hard rounds, still be firing kill shots as the fight progresses, being tired. We've seen Islam kind of start to gas as fights progress. We saw that in the first Volkanovski fight. He was holding on for dear life in round 5. His fight with Poirier, again, Poirier was having a lot of success defending the takedowns, landing strikes as the fight went on. And I've never really seen JDM slow down. He's got really good cardio. Even in that 3rd round of the Burns fight, he's able to break free and explode and get the finish. So I like JDM's ability to kind of break from grappling and immediately get on the pressure with the striking. As guys are trying to reset and catch their breath, he's in their faces immediately. And Makhachev's not really known for pushing a crazy pace the way that Bilal was. So I think that JDM's going to be able to keep up with him with the cardio piece. I like his anti-wrestling striking posture. He's got really good defense with the head movement where he kind of lowers his stance, moves his head very well, hands kind of mid-chest and like a Philly shell style defense. He isn't just really covering up with his hands, which allows guys to kind of shoot under that. He moves his head, hands protecting his body to where he can bring him up if he needs to, but also low enough to dig underhooks if guys shoot. And he keeps his eyes on his opponents to kind of see what they're doing next. He's not covering up to where he can't be able to see what's coming at him. So I like how if he is covering up, he's kind of hunching over with a high guard, anticipating the takedown, meeting opponents head to head, shoulder to shoulder if they shoot behind their punches, and he sits on his jab really well, throwing from a very squatted stance in preparation for takedowns. So never comes out of position, never off balance, really puts himself in danger of easy takedowns, circles out of the pocket, not moving straight back or in straight lines. And he picks his shots and lands at a very high accuracy, which allows him to land the more significant strikes and not tire out if the fight does get pretty grappling heavy. I think his kicks, his stance switches, his body shots will be big in this one against Islam. We saw Dustin Poirier landing the calf kick, Moicano landing the calf kick. I think the body shots will be huge to kind of tax Islam's gas tank. Dustin Poirier had a lot of success with targeting the body, and JDM has some of the best body work in the UFC. So I think he'll be able to hurt him to the body, start to sap on his gas tank, because we really don't know where Islam's cardio sits coming into this new weight class. And I think that his ripping of the body is really good, against a grappler, as well as the uppercut, because your hands are naturally low to defend takedowns. So I like the way he switches stances fluidly. I think he'll be in southpaw and close to land the hard calf kicks, orthodox further out, just to make it harder for Islam to get his lead leg. And I think he'll do a really good job of getting on the gas, being the one pushing forward, winning the foot battle, and just not allowing himself to be pushed back against the cage where where Islam hunts for trips and things like that. So JDM had a lot of success with the front kicks, the body work, showing the knees, showing the uppercuts to deter the takedowns. Had really good takedown defense against Bilal, just controlling the hands, digging underhooks. I think he'll get taken down in this fight, but I think he'll stay safe, be able to work back up to his feet, and just be landing the more damaging strikes on the feet and kind of taking over as the fight progresses. I think Islam will really start to slow down, won't be able to work his offensive grappling the way that he wants to. And I think that he's really going to start to gas and get taxed trying to wrestle the bigger guy and just the damage and the volume that's going to be coming his way from the bigger guy. I think it's going to really be a problem for him, honestly. So I see JDM maybe losing a couple rounds, but I do see him doing enough in this fight to win rounds and get a decision. Thanks.